Hello and welcome to another episode of SN Off the Shelf. I'm your host, Bill Wilson, and I am the senior editor of Supermarket News. Here with me is Kennedy Smith, who is a senior researcher for the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Kennedy is a co-author of a study titled The Dollar Store Invasion, which goes into some of the negative impacts of dollar stores in the community. So Kennedy, tell me how this study came about. Why was it decided that this was a good time and to do this study?
Sure. Thanks. So we did a shorter report a few years ago. It was really more of a fact sheet in 2017, 2018 about the impact that dollar stores were beginning to have on communities at that point. They were, relatively new, certainly their sort of big growth spurt was relatively recent. And we've begun to get some inquiries and comments from communities about, hey, these things are beginning to be a problem, and they're hurting in particular some of our food stores in the community. And then since then, the acceleration has been phenomenal. The number of dollar stores has just exploded. The impact it's had on communities has exploded. And the inquiries that we've gotten from communities has exploded too. And it's largely because of that, because we've had so many calls for assistance and advice and guidance from all kinds of people in communities, from civic leaders, from everyday sort of shoppers who are concerned about what's happening, that we decided to put together a new report. There also has been some new scholarship that's happened since the 2018 fact sheet that we put together. A number of new studies have come out looking at sort of the relationship between dollar stores and race, food health, neighborhood health, all kinds of things like that. And so for all those reasons, we thought it was a good idea to put together the report.
Talk about race and the effect it has in Black and Latino communities. Obviously, according to your study, it does not carry the best effect. You want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And in this, we're drawing in part on some scholarship that's been done by Dr. Jerry Shannon, who's a geography professor in Georgia, at the University of Georgia. But we'd seen this ourselves in doing some mapping, especially in urban areas. I would say this is a little bit more of an urban phenomena than it is a rural, smaller community phenomena. But if you do a map of where dollar stores are, chain dollar stores in almost any city in the U.S., and then do an overlay of the racial demographic characteristics of those locations, you'll see that the dollar stores are overwhelmingly locating in minority neighborhoods, which is a real problem because, these are neighborhoods that maybe don't have the economic resources of others. They don't have the transportation options to be able to go to a full service grocery store someplace else. And they probably don't have the political power to be able to do anything about it either.
So talk about some of the tactics that dollar stores do to kind of drown out any competition. I believe your study points to that, and some of the strategies that they do to push the competition out.
Sure, there's several things that they do. One is that they'll locate near existing food stores, grocery stores, so that they're sort of they have sort of the location advantage there, and they have the deep pockets to be able to wait it out. So they might lose money on some products for a while that grocery store is still in business, but they can afford to lose money on a particular store and wait until they don't have the competition. They also engage in predatory pricing and predatory buying. So because of their market muscle, they're able to demand better prices from their suppliers than grocers can usually buy on a wholesale basis. And they also take part in shrinkflation, where they ask for specific smaller sizes of things. And this is, there are people on TikTok now that are reporting on this a lot, where, a carton of milk that would be, $4 at a full service grocery store might be, $3 at the dollar store, but it's going to be on an ounce by ounce basis more expensive. But people perceive it as being less expensive because the unit price is lower for the item. Lots of tactics like that independent retailers have a very hard time competing with.
You also point out that a lot of these dollar store chains do not have the frozen food capacity. Now, the Dollar Tree store has announced that it is increasing its cooler capacity in some of its stores. Do you view that as a good sign, or just same old, here they are still doing their tactics, they're just going to increase it to frozen foods?
Well, I mean, I think we need to, in all fairness, we need to sort of wait and see what comes of that. They still will not be able to provide the volume capacity of what a full service grocery store does. And that's a problem. It also is worth pointing out, and this sort of gets to their tactics in a way, but also to their business model in terms of shipment and distribution, and the warehousing that they're able to do, is that they tend to sell prepackaged and processed foods. And frozen foods may begin to fall into that category too, which is where, as you know, the people who read your publication know, there's a higher profit margin. So if they were just selling produce, fresh produce, that would be one thing. But they're selling things that the independent grocery stores are also earning a higher profit margin on. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with frozen food. I'm skeptical about whether they will have the ability to get as fresh frozen food as an independent grocer might, but we'll see.
Yeah, the study also points out that they are often short-staffed, so they are in violation of, safety issues. Can you go into any of these safety issues that come into play here?
Sure, and this is something that is evolving pretty quickly right now. I get news feeds every day looking at news stories that are coming across about dollar stores, and this one is really shooting up there. I see stories about this every day. There are a bunch of problems. One is sort of the crime aspect, where because of their business model, they're lightly staffed, and it's just impossible for the staff to be able to unload merchandise and shelve it, and attend to shoppers' questions and needs and helping them find things, and staff the cash register at the same time. And so it's very easy for someone to come in and rob a store. And sometimes these robberies turn violent. The Gun Violence Archive has documented hundreds of violent crimes, gun-related crimes that have happened at dollar stores. We've heard from police officials in a number of communities who say these stores are basically like walk-in self-service ATMs, because it's just, it's so easy to rob. And also because they get so much merchandise in that they can't unpack quickly enough. Their front windows may be blocked. And so people who are driving by or police that are coming by can't see what's happening in the store. And so it's hard to see and monitor. Also, all the shipments they get in, because they don't have the staff capacity to unload them quickly, they pile up in aisles, they pile up in back rooms. And there are a number of documented cases where they're blocking emergency exits, they're blocking electrical panels. The Occupational Safe and Hazard Administration has been all over both of the major dollar store chains for that for certainly this past year, and I see it intensifying with millions of dollars of fines and lawsuits because of it.
So there's been a number of communities since 2019 that have been successful in blocking a dollar store coming to their community. If you can explain, how have they been successful in blocking that? And do you see this trend continuing and seeing more and more of these types of incidents?
Yeah, we actually see it accelerating, and that's based on the calls that we're fielding in our office. And because of that, we also put two companion publications out along with the dollar store report. One of them is a strategy guide for community members and community leaders. And the second is sort of an expanded report on 17 of the major problems that dollar stores create that people can use to educate people in their communities about some of these issues. But it's definitely accelerated since, we've been tracking this since probably 2012, I would say. And since 2012, about 75 communities that we're aware of have blocked dollar stores, but 50 of those have been just in the past couple of years. So it's definitely an uptick. And there really are two different things that are happening. One is, a dollar store is proposed for a community, and people may try to block that particular store from happening. And that often comes down to an interpretation of a community's planning and land use laws and its zoning code. One of the weak links that we see there is that communities very often have comprehensive plans in place, which are basically the vision statement for a community that a community develops every decade or so. And that's the document that will sort of outline what people in the community want to see in terms of, educational opportunities, recreation, economic development, environmental issues, all those things. And they almost always, I've hardly ever seen a comprehensive plan that doesn't say we want to support and cultivate a robust business environment of locally owned businesses and provide good opportunities for entrepreneurs to thrive here. Some variation of that. Well, that has to get turned into shoe leather, so to speak. It has to be, kind of converted into a community zoning code. And often communities haven't done that yet. They haven't taken that leap to turn it into zoning code. So many communities that are able to stop dollar stores do so by looking at their planning and land use laws and finding discrepancies between the vision and the law itself, and making the point that, wait, this is not really what our code enables or what the community wants. So that's sort of thing number one, which is sort of fighting individual proposals for dollar stores. The second, which we're seeing a very rapid uptick on, are communities that are adopting ordinances that in some way regulate or restrict dollar store development. And there are several different types of those, the most common of which is what we call dispersal ordinances, which basically say a new dollar store cannot locate within a certain geographic distance of an existing one, so that we're not, oversaturated with them, but they're kind of spaced out. A few years ago, the first dispersal ordinances that communities adopted tended to specify 1 mile of distance. Many of those sort of first generation ordinances are now being revised to increase that to 2.5 miles or 5 miles. And many of those are also being revised to include specific requirements for how much square footage or how much shelf space of the store has to be devoted to fresh food and produce. Again, making sure that, the store is not creating a food desert with its presence, putting out of business existing grocery stores. There also are ordinances that, limit the number of business licenses given to dollar stores. And there are some ordinances that we call formula business ordinances, which say we want to have a diversity of business types in the community. So we don't want more than X number of, a store that has the same logo, the same marketing tactics, the same merchandise. We want some diversity there. And across the board, all of those ordinances, the communities that are passing them is shooting up pretty quickly. We've even seen one example of a community that's passed an ordinance saying no dollar stores are permitted ever. We have enough. We don't want any more.
So this study really doesn't pull any punches. I've reached out to the Dollar Tree. I'm trying to get comment from them. I'm trying to get them to come on and do an interview. Have you heard from any of these dollar stores, what they're doing to support themselves from this study, saying, you know what, this is not who we really are? Have you seen any of that happening?
No, we've heard nothing from them. There are some local news media that have reached out to them. I don't think any that I've heard of, at least, have heard from Dollar General. I know that there are a couple of communities that have gotten sort of a rote statement back from Dollar Tree saying that, we seek to be, good citizens and provide services and products at a fair price for people. So nothing directly addressing any of the things we've outlined in the report, but simply, stating here's our routine position.
Anything else?
I'll be very curious to see what you hear from them.
I would love to see them respond. Anything else you have to add about this study?
I guess the one thing I would say, which is more sort of about tactics or approach for communities, is that we often hear in local battles about dollar stores, proposed dollar stores, that one of the dollar stores are actually one of its developers, because it's usually the developer who's the one who applies for the zoning variances and the permits, and that's the one that the community has the interface with. But we often hear that, hey, it's just free enterprise. This is the American way. Competition is good. And what is missing from that argument is that if the playing field isn't level, if a big corporation is using its market muscle to get better prices from suppliers and to negotiate special sizes and kind of tricking customers, that's not fair, and it's not a competitive environment, and therefore it really isn't free enterprise. And community leaders need to be courageous in sticking to their comprehensive plans and their zoning codes and saying, no, we're under no obligation to make a zoning exception for this store. We want to really examine this issue carefully and make sure that we're making decisions that are in the best economic and health interest of our community and our citizens.
All right, Kennedy Smith, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.